Call Catherine Delahunty.
Mr Speaker, it's a fascinating day in the Parliament and a particularly fascinating debate. The parallel universes continue to collide. They collide over the meaning of success, education, freedom, representation, you name it. We seem to be talking from different planets. The Educans bill, it's a funny name, Educans. It sounds like recycling or something. Get education and shove it in a can. It's not the Teachers' Council. There's nothing wrong with reviewing the Teacher Council, but really one of the things that the 1,500 and, was it 25 or 75, Tracy? I think 1,525 submitters, the majority of whom there were only 13 who supported the bill, were really concerned about, started with the title because they felt that Educans did not uphold the purpose of a professional body to represent some professionals, i.e. teachers. And that was just a point for them, which wasn't the only reason they were opposing the bill, but it was the starting point because they're very concerned about it. There are many issues with this bill, but I'd just like to start with a quote from one of the Vice-Chancellors who said, and it applies to the provisions around tertiary education, but it really applies to the whole government approach to education. First you funded us, then you supported us, he said, and now you're molesting us. I thought that was a really powerful statement from a Vice-Chancellor of a university. First, governments used to fund the education profession and trust them. Then it stopped funding them completely, but at least supported them. And now these professionals are saying, we feel we're being molested. He was referring to the fact that the government's completely confused about governance and management and doesn't understand the value of university councils, but you could equally refer to the debacle over Educans. So Educans is being set up to replace the Teachers' Council without the teachers' enthusiasm or consent. There are a lot of issues that were raised, but let's start with the Code of Conduct. This is a symbolic issue rather than substantive in many ways, but I think it's a telling issue. The teachers who made submissions to us, which were really fascinating because they had made an effort to bring in younger people and older people, experienced teachers and new teachers, passionate young idealists and people who'd worked in every type of role in schools, and they came together from their different school backgrounds to present very coherently, and they were very concerned about the change in the Code of Ethics being changed to a Code of Conduct. That was one of their issues because they felt that demeaned the profession. And that was symbolic for them because when you set up a council where they don't get to vote who is going to be on it, they are looking for signs of trust or low trust. And this is a sign of low trust. We don't trust you, so we will appoint who's going to be on your council. We don't trust you, so we will make sure that there are provisions in the bill where you are tied to a code of conduct because we don't think you've got a sufficient ethics or the capacity to manage your own ethics. It's okay for doctors, it's okay for others, but teachers, no. You need to be tied to a code of conduct, not a code of ethics. It's a small point to some, but it was brought up by many because they felt it was about a lack of trust. It was like the government doesn't trust us. The huge issue that was fought through and won at the Select Committee was the issue about the right for there to be teachers represented on the council at all. Originally, there were there's a very low ceiling on that, but we've managed to get a guarantee of 5 people with registered practicing certificates. That was the big fight. That fight was won, and I think it's absolute credit to the 1,525 submitters, many of whom who addressed that issue as one of their primary motivations for speaking to us, that teachers needed to be represented by teachers. So that was achieved, but unfortunately, unlike the current Teachers' Council, where you see absolute stalwarts like Claire Amos and Linda Stewart and people like that who have been voted on by their own profession, people who actually are imbued in leading in successful, innovative, initiative, groundbreaking schools who have been voted on by their own profession because they have that leadership, because they understand what educational success is all about. They're not going to be necessarily on it only if the minister thinks it's a good idea. Pretty odd thinking to make a professional body chosen by non-professionals, i.e. by the politicians. It's going to be appointed by the minister, and then we'll let you have some teachers on it, but we'll decide who they are. That's a low trust model. It's a continuation of the low trust model. And really, in the context of the educational debates that have taken place over the last 6 years, we don't need any more low trust models. We need a bit of mutual respect, and we need an ability of a professional body like a teachers' council, if you must call it educans, to be elected by the teachers for the teachers. Now, the Green Party opposes the bill, clearly. We do support the improvements to quality assurance and registration. If that was all the bill was about, which is what it was claimed to be about, it was just a tidy up of registration issues, I think that the government would find a lot more support across the House, but it's not. In addition to those registration and quality assurance improvement issues, they've jammed in all these other things, all this molesting and cutting and faux representation and ministerial control, which is really not a credit to them or a credit to a modern education system. So those are some of the issues. The upshot of this was really that the teachers don't feel like paying for it. Because it's got to be remembered that they pay fees. They actually pay for this body. It's not something that government provides for them. It's not a gift to the teaching profession. It's not something that government's going to appoint the people and government will fund the costs. Oh no. The teachers are being asked to pay for it themselves. So if they're going to pay for this, then perhaps they should get to decide, Minister, who it is that they're paying for. I know it's a radical idea given that we've just passed a bill to limit democracy, but it's quite important that these people, that they should be able to have more choice. We just had a vote, and we've just had a vote for those people, and they are very disappointed in the new regime. They don't believe it's a democratic regime at all. So in fact, the Teachers' Council did have a representative role as well as an appointment role, and now educans will not. So why should the teachers pay? Now, don't be surprised if some of them won't. Don't be surprised if some of them refuse to pay. Because, in fact, they are able to... I'm afraid that the ACT Party person is ranting about monopolies in business again, but this is a debate about education. This is a debate about education. It's not... And I'd like to support Dr. Megan Woods in her point that it's not about a business. This is not a business model. And a profession should choose who represents their profession. A profession should be able to decide. Whether it's the University Council or educans, it should all be in the hands of the profession. The profession is upset not because they're going to have teachers. There are 1,525 submissions in which the consistent theme was they were all concerned, and they represented far more than the people that came to Select Committee. So they represented schools, they represented clusters of schools. If you were at the Select Committee, you would have been impressed and amazed at the number of people that those teachers represented, and they're not happy. It's okay, government, decide you want to do this, but don't expect them to be happy because they're not. So let's not just play around and pretend they are, because it would suit your rhetoric. They are not happy. They're also not happy about the issue of moderation of 10% of their registration. They think that's a logistical nightmare and a disaster, and I think that they've got a point there because, again, it's a way of a paper-based appraisal that could actually be very expensive. Oh, well, they can pay for it again, whether they like it or not, whether they have power over it or not, but they're having a system imposed on them that they don't think will work. Interestingly, nobody really knows what the broader powers of educans are going to be about. You know, there's a lot of rhetoric in the bill. It's quite a wordy and confusing rhetoric about what their powers will be, and I think others have mentioned this. We're not quite sure why they need these powers. We're not quite sure why there's an intention to enhance a limited authority to teach, unless it's to support more charter schools, which is always an option, seems to be what the Undersecretary lives and breathes for. But it's not actually what the teaching profession and the people that came to Select Committee are going to be supportive of it all. So there are a lot of issues with this bill that are very disappointing. And so it has been a major fight. And if it's supposed to be about raising the status of the teaching profession, one does not do that, Mr. Speaker, by taking away their sense of autonomy and professionalism. That is not actually how it works. My colleague will talk more about the University Council's part of the submission, but that was a disaster for the government. Person after person, the highest level, from the Vice-Chancellor to the students from every university that I've ever heard of in this country, came and said, you don't even understand what you're doing. You don't know the difference between governance and management. Management needs to be small and efficient. Governance needs to be broad and professional creative. It's like they didn't even know what they were doing. It was some bizarre idea of Stephen Joyce's, and it absolutely went down like a cup of cold sick with some of the most professional people in this country who run these universities. I was very surprised to see the range of people. And they talked about a conflict of interest, they talked about cricket and conscience, and therefore we won't be supporting the second reading, Mr. Speaker, because this is another unfortunate mess.
Mr. Speaker.
I call Tracy Martin.